Hello guys, welcome to Redditor's Revenge. Here we post amazing revenge stories daily. And if you want more content like this, please subscribe to the channel and stay tuned with us. Moving on to today's first story. So this happened during my senior year in high school 4 years ago. I had an English teacher named Mrs. Smith. Mrs. Smith, or how she liked to refer to herself, Dr. Smith. She didn't have a doctorate, was a mean old bat that hated anything and everything. She was ugly inside and out. To give a mental image of what she looks like, her face sagged so much it looked like she had a perpetual stroke. She had about 2 feet in between her eyebrows and her eyes. Imagine Ursula and Cruella de Vil had a child and then that child had a baby with the devil. You get it, Mrs. Smith. None of the other English teachers liked her. There was nothing that they nor the administration could do due to her tenure. That is until I became her student. Her teaching style included but was not limited to yelling at students, putting them down with petty insults, having us read to ourselves in the middle of class, kicking out students that were dozing off then later falling asleep at her desk, not letting female students go to the restroom for very obvious reasons, and the occasional losing students' work, then accuse the students of not turning their work in. This last part is what crossed the line for me. You see, I wasn't a great student and I sucked at English, so I always played my cards right and made friends with everyone, students and teachers included. So when I struggled and couldn't do something on my own, I let my charm save me, and cash out on my months of being nice to everyone. However, no one could be friends with Mrs. Smith. I tried being polite but I was met with rudeness. I tried asking her how her morning was. I was met with silence and dead stares. I tried asking how I could improve my writing skills, but she told me that she wasn't willing to help. Within the first week of class, I knew I had met my match. So halfway through the semester, we're working on a big research paper. However, the day after the due date, Mrs. Smith had to go up to Illinois for some family issues for 2 weeks. Mind you, we turned in our papers both in hand and on Turnitin.com for plagiarism checking. No biggie, we won't get our grades back for a while. But at least we won't have to deal with her bullshit, or so we thought. A few days after she gets back, only about half of the students got their papers back. The other half, including myself, were sitting there staring and waiting, thinking that she was going to go back to her desk and pull out the remaining papers to return to her students. But nope, she told us to take out our textbooks and start reading Beowulf. Some students, including myself, that didn't receive their papers tried to interject and inquire about our papers, and she snapped back with, "You should have turned them in when they were due." In unison, we respond with, "We did." Of course, she denies it, and within a few days, our grades drop immensely. At the end of the grading period, our report cards show a big fat F for English. Everyone is livid. And the worst part is if you get anything below a C, you are to be moved to a lower level of English at the end of the semester. Between the 0 from the paper that carried almost half of our grade and only a few weeks remaining in the semester, almost half of the class was doomed to fail. Now, most of the students were happy with having to leave her class. There was not much they could do, but I was careful. Remember the teaching methods I mentioned above? Well, Mrs. Smith thought that because we were in a classroom that had no cameras, her behavior wasn't being recorded. She was dead wrong. From the second week on, I started recording audio on my phone every day from the moment I walked into the class to the moment I left. Every day. I caught every single one of her personal attacks on students on tape. When she fell asleep, I pulled out my phone and recorded her. My pleas for help to improve and her refusal to help weren't left out either. Every day, I would go home and cut the audio to keep the good parts. And every day, my collection of dirt on her grew. And remember how I said we used Turnitin.com as well as paper. I had coordinated with all of the other students who were going to fail to screenshot all of their Turnitin receipts and send them to me as proof that they turned in their work. When she decided to fail me for her mistake, she unleashed hell on herself. I went straight to the administration and scheduled a parent-teacher admin conference. A week later, my parents, the principal, the school counselor, the head of the English department, and Mrs. Smith were all present. I started with how she had lost half of the class's work and most of us failed because of it. She denied it and again accused us of turning out our work late as well as cheating, and a bunch of other bullshit and lies. I remained calm and just pulled out a folder that contained all of the screenshots from my backpack and handed it to the principal, who then passed it to the head of the English department, who then asked Mrs. Smith to explain it. She instantly turned red in the face and started stuttering. Before she could get any words out, I say, "That's not all. Listen to this. I pull out my phone and start playing back the highlights from this semester. All the while, I'm staring dead into Mrs. Smith's eyes while trying to hold back a shit-eating grin. The suspense in the room would have killed Jason Statham. After the audio finished, the principal looked at me and said, "I think we've seen enough," and asked me to leave. I sat outside of the conference room savoring the muffled yelling through the walls. I'm pretty sure I heard my dad utter the words "filthy witch," but I don't want to point fingers. The parent-teacher conference was on a Friday. I walked into class the following Monday to see an empty desk and a substitute teacher we all recognized and loved. 10 out of 10 revenge, and would document everything again. Now, here is the end of our first story, and I hope you guys are enjoying my content. So before moving to the next story, you guys can share your thought in the comments section about this horrible teacher who is playing with students' future, and if you have similar encounters with such teachers, you can share it. Also hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay tuned with us for more satisfying revenge stories. Now, moving to our second story. In the early 2000s, when I first moved out on my own, I rented from a complex that charged you for assigned parking. It was an upcharge of $25 a month. If you didn't get assigned parking, you would have to fight for a space on the street. My apartment was in the back of the complex, and I was getting over a recent knee and ankle injury, so I opted for paid parking that was relatively close to my front door. My car was a junker, 3 years older than I am, but it ran semi-okay and the heater worked. As a newly minted adult, I was happy to have it. About 3 months into my lease, my car went to the great scrap heap in the sky. I had gotten used to the local transit system and discovered a nearby store would drop off groceries for me. This was long before Walmart and other stores started doing it, so it was cheaper than figuring out a month's supplies on the bus. So I opted not to replace the car and utilize the bus pass my work reimbursed me for. I went to my leasing office and told them I no longer needed the space, and would you please remove the extra charge from my bill. The manager at the desk was new and had never been asked that before. She promised to look into it and let me know. I was naive and figured it would be gone come the next month. Nope, it was still there. I paid all but the parking space and called up the complex. The same girl, she said she was awaiting word from higher-ups and offered me a credit for the charge as a one-time courtesy. I reminded her that I no longer owned a car, I hadn't just changed my mind. I told her that the space had been empty for close to a month now and that I won't be utilizing it. She said she understood loud and clear and would get it sorted by next month. 3 days before rent was due, she finally got back to me. Apparently, it was in my lease and couldn't be removed without breaking the lease and signing a new one. Even if I didn't move out, the lease breaking and initiation fees would be charged to me, and my rent would go up to the new current market value. This would be over $1,000, so not an option for someone freshly on their own. I kept the parking space on the lease. 3 weeks later, I was reviewing my lease to get the phone number for maintenance and noticed the clause for the parking space. Essentially, I could park a motorcycle, scooter such as Vespa, car, truck, SUV, or trailer in the space gears were turning. For me to be in compliance, I had to have wheels on anything parked in my space. So I went to my local version of Craigslist and found a wheeled container similar to a shipping container. It wasn't cheap, but it was worth every cent. The complex offered storage sheds at an upcharge too. Being fresh out of high school, I didn't have much to store, my neighbor though did. I threw a lock on the unit and offered it to my neighbor for half the cost of a shed, $35 a month. He was able to move his stuff out of his storage unit where he was paying over $100 a month, and the container was available 24/7 and 365 days. He was happy with the arrangement and paid several months in advance. The complex put several tow stickers for out of compliance on the trailer, but I called the tow company and faxed them a copy of the lease where it says trailers are allowed. The container was registered with the county as a utility trailer, so there's nothing they could do. They tried to fine me for improper parking, but again, I had proof I was within my rights. They even offered to remove the charge for parking on my lease if I would relocate the container. With what my neighbor was paying, I could cover my water bill every month, so I declined. I stayed 18 months and sold the trailer to my neighbor when I moved out. He had to rent a car to relocate it to his assigned space, but he said it was worth the couple hundred he paid. He ended up saving over $1,000 a year renting from me. Other neighbors even started bringing in their own containers too, even if it meant getting a second space. Sheds were being vacated at such a large volume The complex tried to give them away for 6 months free. Few took them up on it. The complex amended the new leases to exclude trailers but could do nothing about those that already had them on the spot. Instead of moving out and giving notice, renters would reassign their lease to new people so they could be grandfathered into the trailer clause. I drove by the facility 2 years or so after I moved out, going to a friend for Thanksgiving. The complex had been sold to a new owner and changed their name. But wouldn't you know, there were still about a dozen wheeled shipping containers parked in the lot. Now, here comes to the end of our second story, and I hope you enjoyed this satisfying malicious compliance on the car parking renting company. I love that how OP used that loophole to benefit himself. Guys, I want to hear your thought about this story in the comments section. Also, before you leave, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel and press the notification bell to remain updated on more fantastic stories.
Now, moving on to our final story. The tale of Methany and all her madness. This happened a few years ago. I once had a neighbor that we will call Methany. Methany moved into our neighborhood as a single mom with 3 kids. At the time she moved in, all the kids were between 5 to 8 years old. One of the kids we will call Chris was the oldest and had some mental and physical disabilities that we heard were from him having a brain tumor or cancer. The story changed through the years. Now when Methany moved in, it seemed like she was just an overwhelmed single mom of 3 that had a lot of friends coming by all the time. I can understand this being normal with 3 kids and one with medical needs. A few months after moving in, the number of people who were stopping by, when they were stopping by, the length of the visit, and the condition of the person arriving and leaving all started to seem odd, to say the least. We live in a cul-de-sac in a suburban city outside of Seattle, so most people when doing yard work wave at the neighbors they see and make small talk or smile or something. Not Methany. If you were in your yard doing yard work, she would start to get sketched out. She would make comments of "what are you looking at?" and "mind your own business." Okay, if that is not a red flag, I don't know what is. So in the future, she started to get more aggressive, throwing water balloons at people, which at first we thought she filled with vinegar since it killed anything it touched, but later found out it was piss. Soon she then turned to build a tarp shanty, for privacy for herself and her guests. After this happened, the visitors and the things that would happen got even weirder. We would call the cops and complaints to the city for code violations. Things would change for a few weeks to a month and then back to business as per usual. At this time we started to see Chris more and more at our door and things. This is when he would ask us for food, and if we had an old sweatshirt or jacket that he could have, because he outgrew his. It is snowing and the kid has on shorts and t-shirt flip-flops. He just walked home from school. He had eaten mustard for lunch and had it on his face and shirt still. His mother didn't send him money or have groceries for lunch. We hooked him up with some food and clothes and he was on his way home. That is when we saw when he tried to enter, a man wouldn't let him in and he turned him away. Our neighborhood is called CPS. They came and took them away, and a few days later they are back. This is when we found out that she had been living in Section 8 housing. You would think at this point she would either change her ways or she would lose this place, an opportunity that she was given. Nope, it only got worse. At this point, she is full on drug dealing 24/7 in the open with a loud truck coming and going and blaring music all hours of the night. Shortly after this, her house and vehicle are the subjects of a drive-by shooting. A couple months after that, a dump truck filled with fertilizer dirt is dropped onto her convertible car right after she had driven home. It took her and a few of her minions to get the car unburied. She sold it shortly after and somehow got a new Dodge Ram. It was not long before she was doing a full muralist picture on the side of the truck with various rattle-can techniques. Of course, she needed to do some exhaust alterations as well because she wants to set off car alarms as she drives by. The tension in the neighborhood started to build, and for some reason I was the one who was told all the dirt and did something with it. Everyone else is over 75 and retired or a single woman living by herself. My husband and I were in our late 20s and early 30s and went to physical jobs for 10 to 12 hours a day, 5 to 7 days a week. We really didn't have the patience or time to have our sleep disrupted. I went to confront Methany to turn down the music and please be respectful of the noise ordinance or in the future, I will call the police. She then informed me that she has friends that work at the 911 call center and an officer will never show up. Well, she was wrong. They showed up and she was pushed to her limit. At this point, she had so much hate for me she couldn't contain herself. A couple of weeks later I was leaving for work at 2:30 a.m. I get in my car and realize I left my lunch inside. I grab my purse but I'll leave my car running and grab it off the counter. As soon as I open my front door to go out to my car, I see the Methany motion sensor is now on. I look over, my car is gone. I was in my house for under a minute. She had been watching me closely as threatened in the past. I call the cops. They find it later that afternoon, less than a mile away. You know, don't want to hoof it too far after you abandon your neighbor's car you stole. It was also pretty amazing because they left all the drug paraphernalia behind, and that is when the name Methany was born. She really thought she won that time, but what she didn't plan for was for me to be the vengeful witch I am. Now I knew that all I needed to do was wait. Her activities would resume and up the level just as they had every other time. But this time I was going to document everything with every detail and pictures, videos, and everything else she would do. Then one fateful Friday night I got onto a community service website for anonymous tips and just loaded up my 200+ document file I had made and categorized so they could go through it all as easy as possible. Well, wouldn't you know, on Tuesday afternoon someone got raided and arrested. It was not long before she was bailed out, within hours of being released back at it. So I guess I just got to add to my file again before I do another big upload on my homegirl Methany. By Sunday of that same week, I had over another 100 pieces of documents to add. At this point, I uploaded it, and by Wednesday she was raided and arrested again. She did lose the house by the end of that month. Now, here is the end of our today's video, and I hope you enjoyed this petty revenge completion stories. Guys, I want to hear your thought about this story in the comments section, and let me know if you were in OP's situation, what would you do? And, before you leave, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to remain updated on more fantastic stories.